I think we can start. Okay, so hi everyone. First of all, we are here with Raffaella, and she has lived the polymath life for quite a long time, and also when this topic wasn't discussed or spread into the public narrative. So today she's gonna share with us her precious story. So we're gonna go into this journey with her. Um, I let her start and introduce herself. I hope you enjoy the talk.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Simone, for inviting me. And thank you for setting up this community. I wish there was something like this 3 decades ago. My life would have likely been easier. Um, Let me start with a first note. I have a pretty intense presentation, so I want to have time for some questions if you have them. So I'm just going to kick right in. But I have first a disclaimer, and that is if my pointer works. Oh, maybe I have to. Okay. Yeah, it's working. So, a quick word of disclaimer. My goal tonight is not to be prescriptive. I don't have recipes. I don't have solutions. I don't have techniques. I don't want to tell you what you should do because every one of us is magically unique. This is just my story. Well, it's a little summary of my story. And it's what in design practice we would call a case study. So, with that, let's start with me. Who am I? Well, let me share my bio with you. It's a lot, isn't it? And for a very long time, a lot of the people around me that are present in my life, but are not necessarily chosen, like family or people that I work with, have always considered me for being a little too intense, a little too much. And I guess I can't really blame them. But seriously, I have always felt different. I guess this is a trait that I really grew up with. Partially was because of my story, my upbringing, my family. We traveled a lot, and then I ended up living in this very tiny place in the Italian countryside, and I was different. So my feeling different wasn't entirely in my head. But on a different level, I was always interested in depth, and I always had a hard time with surfing the surface of things. And this I found for some people was a turn off because every conversation was like, uh, let's dive down, and not everyone is willing and open to that. So looking back, I can see my life as definitely being an unconventional one, if you allow me the euphemism. And most of the times, I have to say, I felt okay with being the quirky one, being the strange one. Sometimes I even felt proud of it, but not always. And for a very long time, the multitude of interests that drove me felt like flaws. I felt wrong for not being able to stay vertical. I felt wrong for feeling I couldn't keep focus. Um, I got bored easily. So if I stayed in a practice for too long, I would just get first restless and then out loud, totally bored. And I felt I was wrong. I felt I was failing in some way. It took me decades to overcome this and to find ways of coping. What you see is a page from a personal brochure I designed for myself in 2015. And here I was trying to stick my head out a little bit. I was trying to pass the idea that being a generalist was kind of like being a human Swiss Army knife. And how could that be a wrong thing? I mean, Swiss Army knives are super useful. I wanted to stop feeling like a master of none. And I wanted to allow myself to accept that I was, after all, a master of some. It took me 4 more years from that brochure to integrate the word polymath into my professional identity. In a way, this was my way to come out of my personal closet. But I was over 50 at that time. Okay. Today, I know that being as I am is not a flaw at all, and that I am kind of a human Swiss Army knife, and that this wiring, this way of being, can be a superpower, especially at this moment in time. But I'd be lying to you if I were to say that this was an easy, smooth ride. I got lost many times. I had to go find myself many times. And at the end, I did always manage to find myself. And even every time I got broken, I got better at piecing myself together. With enough practice, I even learned that I could choose how to piece myself together. Which pieces were good and healthy and useful, and which pieces I should just let go. Looking back, I see patterns. I recognize that the practices and the tools and the devices that, consciously or not, I found and I used to cope and to survive and to evolve. A designer is a problem solver, someone who seeks order in complexity. In my personal view, being a designer requires a mindset that you either develop early on or that maybe you're born with, at least from a wiring perspective, a potential perspective. My first call as a teenager was to become a lawyer. Law is a practice where rigor, rules, and order are fundamental, and they are used to navigate and manage complexity. But there has always been a strong rebellious force in me. I've always been kind of like, in Italian, we say bastian contrario, the person that is, you know what? No. The one that refuses constraints that are too binding and rules that are too rigid. So the law wasn't exactly, the perfect path. And so there I was, a living contradiction. Someone that longed for rules and yet at the same time looked for ways to break them. And that is one principle of design. I will also believe that that tension was, at least in part, what nourished my creativity. And for clarity, with creativity, I mean the need to create, the drive to give birth to one's thought children. Okay, so the need for what I do to have a purpose. And I also needed practicality. I wanted the outputs of my thinking processes to be tangible and usable and useful. I needed to be an artisan, not an artist. So I guess looking back, uh, it was almost inevitable, I guess, for me to become a designer. Because design was the one practice that could satisfy my need for order, my need to be creative, uh, and my need to channel my creativity, and also the need to produce tangible outcomes. A designer is not an artist. I hope we all are on the ball with that. At least this is my view of the practice. And in fact, a designer is as close as one can get to being an artisan, except the designer's output are blueprints, their plans, their projects, and not crafted artifacts. Design principles are universal. And as a designer, I got to apply the same practices and the same knowledges and competences, but to combat boredom, I had the novelty and challenges of different contexts and different clients and new things to learn. So I guess this is how I found instinctively, because it wasn't a plan, it just kind of, happened. Uh, my personal way to navigate my complexities and life's complexity, to nourish my need for novelty and keep boredom at bay, to be able to learn continuously and widely, and to allow my creative spirits to give birth to my new visions. But while constraints and challenges in design are manageable and they're interesting and they foster creativity and they spur you, life is way more complex and challenges come in multiple forms and from multiple fronts. So some difficulties arise from the cracks and the holes that are inside of us. And pain may come from the feeling of loneliness or from the yearning for a community of peers. So thank you. Or from the need to belong. In my experience, I am honestly confessing, since these are confessions, that sometimes it did feel as if someone had dropped me on earth and left me with no instructions. Some experiences in our personal or professional life can shatter us to pieces. When it happens, we are left trying to crawl out of what's left of our old selves. Hardship may come from the fragility we carry inside, from invisible weapons that crack and weaken our internal systems, our I systems. Insecurities corrode us, and they corrode us from the inside. They make us quiver. They make us see monsters even when there are none. Insecurity feeds that voice inside that I'm sure many of us know. That voice that reminds us constantly that we may be a fraud, the voice that eats up our confidence, that makes us overperform and drains our energy and leaves us exhausted and often empty. Challenges, experiences, insecurities, the obstacles we meet might cultivate and foster doubt in us. But doubt isn't necessarily a bad emotion. In fact, doubt, when healthy and when opportunely directed, keeps our arrogance at bay, makes us question the answer we think we already have. It challenges our biases. It makes us go deeper and go further in the search for clarity. And when doubt meets curiosity, doubt spurs investigation. And investigation is what fosters discovery and knowledge and insights. Doubt fosters and cultivates in us a critical approach to ideas and opinions. It's a necessary skill for designers, but in my opinion, it's a very valuable one for everyone. Healthy doubt nourishes healthy curiosity. Now, curiosity to me is the highest manifestation of intelligence, excuse me. And obviously, I'm not talking about the gossipy kind. Um, I'm talking about that drive towards making sense of things, uh, that search for order and patterns, the processes that create order, uh, the discovery of new forms of order, of new synchronicities, of new um, paths. I'm talking about that healthy, strong compulsion to try and understand, to try and make sense, to chew and digest and metabolize and get nourished. That urge that drives any and all forms of growth. All discoveries are opportunity, even the bad ones. I would say, especially the bad ones. All failures are opportunity. They are building blocks for an upgraded version of ourselves, for a new release of ourselves, us X.0. When we get broken, we can choose the opportunity to reassemble ourselves, hopefully better. We have the opportunity. It's a little bit like, moving. When we move from one house to another, we have the opportunity to get rid of what is no longer serving us. When we fail and we get back up, bruised but wiser, we are building our resilience muscle. And we can flex that muscle when the next when the next curveball arrives, because we know it's going to arrive. And the better prepared we are, the more we can handle difficulties and resist to difficulties. Meeting mindfulness was the result of discovery, but not a fully conscious one. I was looking for something that could offer me some much needed relief. As you may imagine, I was an overthinker. I was always churning. I was a ruminator. I couldn't think of the word. And this would simply exhaust me and leave me stuck. So I don't say this lightly, but mindfulness changed my life. Mindfulness helped me learn to let go of the need to control what and who was around me. It taught me to stop trying to control the outside and focus on exercising control on what was happening inside of me. I learned to quiet that rumination and the noise inside my overactive brain. I learned to create a buffer space so I was able to better handle chaos when it happened. And I learned one of my most important life skills. I learned to recognize what triggered me. So I was able to better control or maybe avoid altogether when I was good at it, being reactive to provocations or emotional stimuli. I learned the difference between acting and reacting. And this is a very powerful skill. This year, I'll be turning 60. At times, it feels incredible because in my mind, I'm the same me as always. So I live in sort of an eternal groundhog day, you know, it's me, I'm me. I don't feel older, though my body does. Um, and then other times I freak out because it feels like these 60 years just kind of like flew by. And you know how they say, you know, time flies when you're having fun. And I didn't have fun for 60 years. Sometimes I had like zero fun. But still, it just, you know, it's like, wait, I was in high school the other day. I was in college, you know, just a few hours ago. But age is a huge privilege. First of all, because no, you know, not everyone gets to age. But it's also a time in life where, to cite the famous talk by Steve Jobs, uh, where looking back, you start seeing the patterns and you start see the paths that have taken us where we are now. Um, it's a time where you clearly understand how every choice we make shapes our lives, how every uh, you know door we choose to enter or not uh, um, opens up a variety of variables that can literally change the road we walk. It's also a time where, if we're lucky, we understand the benefits of learning acceptance and of learning of letting go. Learning to let go, for me, I'm a Virgo, I'm a perfectionist. It was probably the hardest lesson I had to learn. I was a control freak, and it was necessary for me to get broken into tiny pieces and taking the time to rebuild myself to see how accepting and letting go are so vital. The benefits for me were immense. Mind you, when I use the term acceptance, I don't mean bowing down. I don't mean enduring injustice. Quite the contrary, in fact. What I mean with acceptance is gaining the clarity we need to choose which fights to fight and which fights are simply not worthy of our energy. And this goes for fights, for people, for circumstances, for jobs. Without acceptance, there also can be a sincere and useful and true gratitude practice. And gratitude is a lens we can use to make sense of things, especially of the bad things that may happen to us. Gratitude helps us frame our environment and see that not everything is dark or light. Gratitude can foster our hope and our resilience. But getting back to acceptance, most of all, acceptance allows us the freedom to fully embrace ourselves and the multitudes we inhabit. It means allowing for our perfect imperfection, and it means acknowledging that failing is an inevitable part of progress, and so an inevitable part of growth. Acceptance and gratitude allow us to embrace our limits and frame them as constraints and opportunity. And that is in the best design project. Thank you. And if you have questions, I'm all for you now. Ah! Ah!
We can only do that virtually for now.
Maybe if it's okay, I'm just going to start with a question. First of all, thank you so much. I think I mentioned before, I plan to use this talk to just make dinner. It was way too interesting to get away from the table and actually get something to eat, but I loved it. I love the design. I mean, I can see that you're a designer. It was super easy to just follow you along, and seeing a presentation that is supporting the speaker instead of speaking at the same time as the speaker tries to have a talk is just amazing. There was one question that I thought of, I think rather in the beginning. You were talking about struggling, and I think you mentioned quite a few ways in which we as humans can struggle. And I think there was loneliness and breaking, hardship, insecurities, the imposter syndrome, and things like that. The question that came to my mind, and I'll give you the freedom to answer however you would like. In a situation when you were struggling, regardless of the reason or the time in your life, what was the experience like of catching yourself?
So if I understand correctly, you're asking me how I kind of saw myself, how I perceived myself?
I think maybe yourself, but also the situation itself. I'm quite interested what this catching yourself felt like to you in a situation that might come to your mind at the moment.
Well, I think, and I'm going to try and answer this way, and please, correct me or add more information if I don't answer your question correctly. I spoke about mindfulness, and with mindfulness, I don't mean, meditation or strange practices. I literally stumbled to mindfulness because the deepest, most broken moment of my life, I was broken, and I had this brain that kept. So I would just get to, do nothing all day and be dead, exhausted at night, and wondering, okay, so I've done nothing, and yet, at least I should be rested. And while I was trying things to do, I started, by chance, universe, I don't know, I started coloring. I had a coloring book, and I started coloring, and I noticed, not after 5 minutes, after a few times, I noticed that when I was coloring, brain would shut up. And so I kind of said, oh, wait. And I actually remember I started Googling, coloring books, and I found out that, there was these coloring books for adults, and that coloring was considered a mindfulness practice. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not gonna, I ended up, marrying the practice of coloring. I designed coloring books, and but being able to shut down, and this is probably the answer that you were looking for, being able to shut my brain up, to give myself rest, gave me that space, that buffer that I mentioned, to start observing things, and to start observing myself and saying, oh, when this happened, this is what I do. And when this happens, this is how I react. And obviously I started reading. I started, because that's what I do. I just dive into things, right? And so I was able to slowly, this was not 2 months. This was not, this was no Vulcan touch for this. But as I progressed, I could see that it was working for me. And so it just became practice. It just became learning to stop, learning to recognize my emotion, and accepting those emotions. I mean, if one day, still today, to date, there are mornings when I wake up and I'm like, I hate the whole world. I'm like grumpy Smurf. And, and I hate everyone. And other mornings I wake up and I'm like the saddest human being in life. And I've learned that I have hormones, I have, chemical things happening. And so I've learned that, to quote Rosella O'Hara, tomorrow is another day. And so if today I'm sad, I try and check, with myself, if I can find a reason. Most of the time there is a reason. Something happens. I'm an empath. So if something around me, if someone around me or someone globally suffers, I suffer for that. But I just take it as a rainy day. I just take it as, okay, so today is this way. I'll do what I can to cope. And I force myself, because sometimes, I may hate everyone, but I still need to do a client call and not lose the client in the process. But, it's just a little space of, it's just like a little bubble around me that allows me to stay in the feeling and not act on that feeling. Does it help? Was that the question, the answer? I don't know. Sorry.
No, I love that. Thank you. I think I asked a question where there's no right answer to it. And honestly, I asked the question because the question came up for myself. Like I just asked myself the question. I didn't know how to answer. So naturally, I'm going to ask someone else and see what they answer. But yeah, that was really helpful. And I can relate with that quite a lot. And also seeing that what I'm still working on at the moment, where I feel I want to get better. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I have a question, Rafaela.
Yeah.
It's more on, since we're trying now to build a community that you might have found helpful and useful back in the day, what is something that you would like to see in it? And also what is something you felt you needed, like apart from the things that you mentioned, but more specifically, apart from the like-minded people that you would have liked to meet, is it more of like seeing more people also being creative and being exposed most like more in the media, more nowadays talking more about generalism, or was just trying to find your own community, like the small part of the community?
So I'm gonna give you two answers layered, because being old, and forgive me if I stress this, but it's a fact. So I'm sort of like at the end of my coming to terms with this. So certainly, what I would have loved is, well, one thing is really petty, and I'm sorry, but I'm gonna say it because this is a confession. One thing is I would love to have a place where have conversations that are not about nail polish or the weather or whatever. But that's very personal because that's what I was sort of not really blessed, but what's the contrary of being blessed? Damned with, the fact that having deep conversation, that can be about nail polish. You know what I'm saying? They don't have to be about the metaphysical whatever, but that are not shallow, that are human, that are connecting. So I think that was and is something that I would love for a community. And then the second half of the question is that if I were 30 and I was coming to meet this community, maybe I would like to, yes, be out there, know that, be aware that it exists, but maybe, but again, it's me, the strongest thing would be to feel like, oh, look, I'm not alone. I'm not weird, or I am weird, but that's okay. I'm weird as in a sort of shared weirdness that is perfectly fine, and it's fine to not be weird in this way. It's not like the others are terrible, but yeah, I think that for me, knowing that this community exists and knowing that it's a safe space, that would be important, and maybe a place where also one can come and ask questions. So a safe space to express, but also a safe space to say, I'm feeling this way. Is anybody else feeling this way? And or even Today, I feel like the world is really horrible. Is there anyone that wants to, that has 15 minutes to take virtual coffee with me and, I don't know, show me your cats and I'll show you mine, kind of thing. So connectedness is what I missed, but again, me. So that helps. That was that
Yeah, it does.
great answer. See, the imposter in me is like, oh, am I answering correctly or not?
No, like obviously, like there was no correct answer, but thank you for that. It's exactly what we're trying to build here.
So no questions? Yes, good.
I would go. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think like I'm a designer and I feel some of the lines and you put in words some of the feelings that I couldn't express. So thank you for that. Especially the kind of not wasting energy in terms of working and also in people or investing it where you feel some kind of empathy. I think that's something that I really um, I was feeling it. So thank you for that. And one of the questions I would love to ask you, seen in perspective over the years, I think that are kind of people that do a lot of things and we have like multiple lives in a lifetime, right? We could be like an artist, a musician, and then you want to be an architect. I don't know. We are surfing across projects and a lot of projects are seamlessly the transition between one another because you are finding something in the process and you go that direction. But sometimes these changes are abruptly because something finished and now you have to reinvent yourself either for personal reasons or whatever, right? So being in the situation of both, I want to know your side, which ones you've appreciated the most or you think made you grew most. The ones that are happen naturally during the process or the ones that you have enough time to reinvent yourself from the ground and be like, I want to spend time doing this because I have time to just no pressure at all. And I want to do and invest time and effort doing this specific thing right now.
Okay, so without trying to sound poor me, speaking of choices, I made some choices in my life that felt really cool, but again, looking back, were pretty shitty ones. Like for example, I was living and working in New York, and then I met my partner number one. And of course, I left New York and I moved to Italy, which was like sort of leaping backwards work wise. And again, because life is interesting, I leaped back to Italy at a time where this huge scandal. So, small parenthesis, my first work was in advertising. So, I was an advertising art director. And so, I came back to Italy and all the advertising agencies in Milan, because that's where we moved to, were had frozen all hiring, and they were all in a mess, and they didn't know how to get rid of all the people that they had hired to, make clients happy. And I would go around with my portfolio, which was not to toot my horn, but no one had a portfolio like mine because I went to FIT. I went to a school that did not exist in Italy. I was working at McCain Erickson when I left New York, and I remember them saying, I would love to hire you, but we can't. So, and this was just a little example. So, another thing that I found as I was progressing was that while I had no issues being an employee in New York, because the culture, the work culture was different, I had a very, 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 very hard time being an employee in Italy because the work culture is awful. And the attitude was kind of like, oh, you owe me because I give you a job. You know, and I was, as I said in my talk, I, certain things I don't really swallow well. And so after a few years, I did ended up, I worked, in Armando Testa in Milano. I worked at another couple of boutique agencies. But at one point I said, you know what? No, this is not for me. I'm going to be a freelancer. So from that point on, I kind of had to not be all that choosy, because when you're a freelancer, especially in a country that is very stylish but has very little respect for design, it wasn't easy. It's still not easy. And so in any case, I had another experience as an employee, which was actually the experience that brought me to my huge breakage, internal breakage. And still to this day, there is no comparison for me between being a freelancer and being an employee. Why am I telling you all of this? Because when you're a freelancer, what you swap for freedom is living dangerously. Living dangerously, finding work, getting paid, because we have that little details in Italy where people may not pay their invoices and you have to go chase them. So I didn't have many moments where I was able to choose my experiences and choose what to learn and choose what to do. I would say that work-wise, I was always, okay, whatever it comes, I'll take. And personal interest-wise, I was always kind of driven, again, by curiosity. It's like, ooh, oh, there's this thing. What is it? Never heard of it. And I just go into this sort of like, rabbit holes, and then maybe I come out and it's like, oh, okay, not that interesting. I to this day I take loads of courses. I love learning things. I love learning things and not do anything with it. But if I need to, I have that skill. And that's pretty much how my life was. There wasn't a lot of planning ahead because of the choices, and because of the market and because of my context. So it was kind of like living on a prayer, living on a not day to day, but short term to short term. So I don't know if that answers you, but that's the experience I can bring you. Unfortunately, is only mine.
Again, it's like no right or wrong answers. So thank you so much for answering.
You're very welcome. No more questions? In the meantime, let me. Okay, if you're still seeing my screen, and if you want to look for me, that's my website, and this is my social handle. I am progressively, moving out of many social contexts. And the one I'm most active and that I am enjoying the most right now, it's Blue Sky. So if you are on Blue Sky and you want to say hi, just say hi. And if you have questions or just things come up, maybe, you know, not right away, but you have questions that you want to ask me, the community, I'm there. Just, you know, maybe write me, maybe ping me so that I can get notification. And if I don't react, to do it again, because I'm me. So I may not, you know, sometimes I'm overwhelmed, but I would happily answer any other information or question that you might have.
Thank you so much, Raffaella.
Thank you, Jessica.
I also got
Yeah.
some messages in private that they really enjoyed the webinar, but they don't want to say it.
Okay.
So I'm gonna share the messages later on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Raffaella. I'm so glad that I reached out to you.
Yes.
We created this opportunity. It's not easy to expose themselves like that, like you did, but
Yeah.
I think that it was such a unique and meaningful opportunity for all of us. You sparked many reflections, and you did it, as all your experience did in the best way, also graphically and in terms of rhythm. So really thank you about that, about your work. And the courage to expose yourself like that.
That also comes with age. With age, you get to a point where you just simply stop giving shits about things. You know, you just run out of shits, basically, and it's like, you know. So, you know, I didn't do anything bad. I'm not in the Epstein files, so I can just, you know, be out there.
Great. Thanks again also to everyone who joined, and see you soon in the community. Tomorrow there's the third webinar of the Renaissance Week. So if you want to join us, it will be with Dave Kang, that will share with us another way of framing, understanding ourselves, like Raffaella shared with us, and then framing that in a structure. And so there's another opportunity to sneak peek into another life of Polymath. So see you soon, and thanks to everyone. Thank you again,
Grazie.
Raffaella.
Bye,
Ciao a
everybody.
tutti.
Thank you. Bye.